Hi, everybody. I'm Nicole, and the title of my presentation is The Relationship Between Gut Dysbiosis and Maladaptive Behavior Suggests Evolutionary Mismatch. And I just wanted to thank my faculty advisor, though she couldn't be here today, Dr. Hodges-Simeon, for all of her help and her guidance for my project. Here we are. So first, I wanted to talk about the evolutionary mismatch hypothesis. This hypothesis states that the rich, diverse environment of our evolutionary past has led to behavioral and genetic traits which have been retained by contemporary human populations. So our adaptive alleles, which have benefited us in the past, are no longer favorable in our current industrialized environment. And this is evidenced in bacterial shifts in our microbiome, which have been thought to cause the rise of so-called Western diseases. And these include inflammatory diseases, obesity, and diabetes. So the microbiome is made up of the collective genomes of microbes in our body, communities of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and viruses which live inside and on the human body. So I will be specifically referring to the gut microbiome because our gut hosts the largest number of bacterial communities in our body. An interesting link is between the gut and the brain, and it's called the gut-brain axis. So with the gut-brain axis, any sort of GI or gut disruption is linked to a change in psychology, so changes in mood, in emotion, and cognition. And this is thought to be caused by an imbalance of bacteria in our microbiome. And this leads us to look at how an environment of stress is causing GI symptoms and resulting in maladaptive behaviors. Chronic stressors have been found to weaken host physiology and actually been shown to weaken the gut lining, which increases dysfunctional responses in the gut. And this is thought to be caused by a decrease in overall microbiome diversity. So our gut colonies are much less diverse than they were 100 years ago. And this is thought to be caused by an increase in bad bacteria like Clostridium. These bad bacteria are thought to be linked to maladaptive behaviors. The ones that I'll be addressing are anxious behaviors, depressive behaviors, irritability, overactivity, and emotional reactivity. What I did was take an in-depth look at the MARBLE study. MARBLE stands for Markers of Autism Risk in Babies Learning Early Signs. This is a longitudinal study conducted at UC Davis, which follows pregnant women who have already had a biological child with autism. So specifically, I looked at clinical studies following their second child from pregnancy to early childhood. This is publicly available data, which was submitted to the National Institute of Mental Health, and it includes stress surveys, cognitive behavioral checklists, and GI symptoms. It's made of 353 children from the ages of 24 months to 50 months, so very early childhood. What I did was I gathered information from autism diagnostic schedules, as well as child behavioral checklists, which I'll talk about more in the next slide. So the child behavioral checklist consists of different syndrome scales, and it's scored on a 3-point Likert scale. So score 0 indicates that the behavior is absent, 1 indicates that the behavior occurs sometimes, and 2 indicates that the behavior occurs pretty often. And the syndrome scales that I looked at were anxious depressed, somatic problem, social problems, and aggressive behaviors. And the variables that I specifically had in my data set were anxiety, nervousness, and somatic problems. And I indicate the GI total variable, which is a combination of nausea, diarrhea, painful bowel movements, and constipation. And I just included that in the single variable GI total. The Autism Diagnostic Observational Schedule is a widely used assessment tool. It's considered the gold standard for an autism spectrum diagnosis. And I use this to specifically look at markers for autism, and these include aggression, tantrums, and stereotyped behavior. So these are the results I have. I'm going to see if I can annotate here with an arrow or a mouse. Okay, So hopefully you can see my mouse, but here I have the GI total so I split it into with all my participants in the first column, and then participants with only an autism diagnosis, and then participants without autism. On the left, I have the maladaptive behaviors I specifically looked at. So the numbers I have here indicate whether maladaptive behaviors I have listed on the left are significant predictors of GI symptoms. So we can see for anxious depressed that the number is 0.293, and the 3 stars here indicate that it's highly significant. So anxious depressed behavior is a significant predictor of the GI total symptoms. And we see for nervousness that across the 3 columns that it's around 0.5, and it's also highly predictive. For emotionally reactive, this is the highest standardized beta that we see. So it's highly predictive of GI total. And what's interesting is the next 2, overactivity and stereotype behavior, are maladaptive behavior specific to an autism diagnosis. And these numbers are very small and negative, and they don't hold significance at all in relation to GI. And the aggressive behavior here is, again, pretty high with a high significance. So here I wanted to show the percentage of children with GI symptoms looking at children with autism and children without. So we can see that in the light blue here, that children with autism across all of these GI symptoms have a higher percentage, they're presenting with these symptoms at a higher percentage, and children with autism are a lower percentage. And these match up with previous studies which show that children with autism do present with more GI symptoms. So what these results show us is that the models with my beta numbers, they show significant correlations and predictions between maladaptive behaviors and GI symptoms. And this, again, makes sense because of the gut-brain axis. They react bidirectionally in response to stress. And we see that the greatest predictions occur between emotional reactivity and GI distress, which is interesting because emotional reactivity refers to how you overreact to a new situation. And it's also an indicator of certain mood disorders. Again, children with autism have greater GI symptoms, but why this still remains a mystery. So big picture explanation is that a poor environment, whether that's because of a stressful home environment or poor nutrition, leads to changes in the microbiome, resulting in GI distress and resulting maladaptive behaviors in children. So what this shows us is that exposure to psychological stress at an early age causes symptomatic problems. So in what I'm looking at, specifically GI problems. And that behaviors specific to individuals with autism are not significant predictors of these GI problems. So whatever is causing that increase in GI problems in children with autism, it's not related to the maladaptive behaviors. And hopefully therapeutic interventions to treat gut dysbiosis, there will be more research into this. So hopefully the treatments will target both GI and also maladaptive symptoms. What I'd really love to do is take stool samples to examine individuals' microbiomes. It'll give us a clearer picture on the link between GI dysbiosis and maladaptive behaviors. And that is all. Thank you.